Kia ora, g'day, I'm Steve. You're about to watch a demonstration of step 2, which is the giving of relevant and targeted information to family members. You'll see myself as the practitioner and Richard Bellerman as the affected family member. It is important when undertaking step 2, of course, you remember the step 2 competencies about the beginning of the session, providing targeted relevant addiction related information, then general information, then checking at areas that the family member might think other family members might need information. A key part is to support family members to find out information for themselves, to empower them to know where to look and ensure that they're capable of finding this information. It's also important then that we end the session correctly with a summary of the main issues, as well as checking on the helpfulness and logistics for the next session, and of course assessing risk and checking on the safety of family members. So the core counselling competencies are a key part of every step, especially step 2.
Okay, so now that we've checked how useful, what you found useful was about last session, Richard, we'll get stuck into step 2, and obviously I'll give you a bit of an agenda as to what we're going to do, but firstly, I suppose talk about the purpose of it. So it is all about providing you relevant and targeted information, both about addictions and any other general information, because one thing we do know from this stress strain information and coping support model is that the stress that you experience leads to all the strain, all the worries, concerns and fears that you have. And we know that there's a lot of confusion that family members have. And you said that at the end of last week, you're really confused about what your wife's doing. And so sometimes providing relevant information, targeted information that you need, questions you need answered, can actually help reduce the stress on you. And so that's why we have a whole step, what's the word that I'm looking for? Targeted to your information needs. And so we'll start off kind of checking in around what your information needs are about addiction in general, sort of both alcohol and the gambling that your wife is engaged with. Then I'll find out whether or not, or we'll explore, and using that questionnaire we did last week about any other general information needs that you might have. But then it's also going to be important that we'll kind of explore or check in around what the information needs about the rest of the family what they might be. Obviously your daughters we spoke about briefly last week, Jill's mum, and all the other, her sisters as well, her siblings. So we got a bit to cover off, and we'll kind of do it in sections, I suppose. But that's the agenda for today. Does that sound okay for you?
Yeah. That's
cool.
That'll be great. Thanks.
So at the end of last week, when I was asking you about sort of what information needs you might have, you were kind of saying how you found it really confusing. You kind of you see the drinking; it's really obvious when she's doing that, and perhaps there were some questions around why she keeps drinking it. But the biggest confusion you had was, what does she get from the gambling? The getting online and playing games and giving money through the internet. It sounded as though you didn't really understand how or why she doesn't just stop. And so we agreed that we'd have a bit of a conversation. I'll give you some information about that. Does that sound still relevant to you?
I mean, absolutely. As well, though, I don't really understand anything about gambling, and I don't know how I can know when she is. Before she got into doing things online, I knew. We went on a holiday to the US, and we went to Las Vegas because it seemed like an interesting place to go to. But I was with her, so I could see she was gambling. I could see what she was doing. I could see that it was somehow taking over, and I sort of could drag her out and go back to our hotel. But now, she's always on her phone. I always feel that there's at least 3 people in our relationship, me, her, and the telephone. And I don't know whether she's checking her emails or buying stuff from online or Amazon, or whether she's gambling. And I don't really understand what you do when you gamble online. Yes, what you were saying, I don't know why she's doing it. I don't know what she gets from it, but also I feel completely shut out. I can't even observe her doing it. When she's drinking, I can see her drinking. I can see the effects of her drinking.
It's more obvious.
We can. I still don't think there's a lot I can do about it, but at least it's there. I know what I'm dealing with. But with the gambling, I just don't know what I'm dealing with.
It sounds as though it's kind of distressing to not know, isn't it?
I feel. I mean, it's ridiculous because it's her, in a sense, that is out of control. But actually, I feel out of control. I feel I don't. When she's drinking, I can see her out of control, but I'm not out of control because I know what's going on. But I just don't know what's going on. So I do feel out of control as well. So somehow her out of control is sucking me into being out of control. It's I don't know. It's really odd.
But it's a common experience of family members, that sense of out of control. She's out of control, you feel that way because perhaps there is, as we're talking about here, that just complete lack of understanding as to, well, when and how and what can I do about it? And so we will kind of talk a little bit about, I suppose, what it is, and I suppose hopefully
other people feel this as well. Then it's not just me.
It's not just you. Absolutely not. We kind of talked a bit about that last session, didn't we? About sort of how, what you feel, you could feel as though it's just you, but it's actually not. It's a feature of, it's a feeling, it's an experience that lots of other family members feel just because of the stress and the strain. And I suppose by providing you with some information today, hopefully, that reduces some of that confusion or might give you a bit more of an idea of, what's actually going on here? Is she gambling? And in next week's session, step 3, we'll talk about how you might respond to situations where you think you are. So that's jumping ahead a little bit. But so today, I suppose, maybe we start with this, a bit of an explanation around, and tell me if this is a useful place to start for you, about why people do it, like what they get from what's actually happening that makes someone keep going back to it, whether they putting money in the machines and pulling the slot arm down or sitting on their phone and playing a game and playing a game and playing a game. Yeah, would that be a useful starting point?
Very. I'd love to feel I understood a bit about what she was doing.
So there is and this is similar for both alcohol, any substance, any sort of addiction. There is a chemical in our body. I don't know if you've ever heard of it. It's called dopamine. And it's called it's the feel-good chemical, the pleasure chemical. It's the chemical that when we do something that is important for our survival, this chemical is released and it creates pleasure in our brain. And the brain says, oh, that's good, do it again. And it's things like eating, it's things like having sex, which are important for our survival, that when we do it, the brain gets this chemical and goes, oh, yes, please do that again. And so we do it again, and that behavior becomes reinforced. So we feel good when we do it, and we know, oh, if I do that, I'll feel good. And sometimes if we do it in a particular place, then we can start to feel that pleasure. Even, for example, we're standing in the kitchen, we smell the smells of food, and we go, oh, I know this is going to feel good. The brain is preparing and getting us ready to experience that. And so some of that stuff happens, when we're drinking and gambling as well. So what happens is if we do something like, put some money in a machine or open up a game and we have a win, we go, oh, that's good. Yeah, I won. And this chemical is released in our body because the brain says, yeah, that's good. That's fun. I enjoyed that. And so the brain says, oh, well, maybe I'll do it again. And so more of that chemical is released every time we do it. And that behavior becomes reinforced. We start to think, oh, yeah, well, I'll do it again. I want to feel good. I'll do it again. And sometimes with sort of internet or even phone games, they're set up in a way that you're not always going to win, but you win every so often, that you just go, oh, there's a little bit. Oh, when am I going to get that next little hit or surge of adrenaline? And so the behavior becomes more reinforced because it's not certain when we're going to get it. And often people, if they've perhaps gambled money and they've got none left, or they've been doing it for a long time and they're thinking, oh, maybe I should stop. Part of the brain goes, oh yeah, but only just let's do it a little bit more. And hope for that next little bit of dopamine. And so people can spend hours on their phone just getting sucked in, waiting for that next little bit of adrenaline. Does that make sense to you?
Yeah, it makes sense, but I mean, how do I stop this dopamine getting produced?
That's a really good question. And I
otherwise,
suppose,
I mean, you're saying that it's almost preordained that when she clicks onto or even thinks about clicking onto a gambling site, she's going to get this rush of whatever you said, dopamine.
Dopamine, the expectation that
she's going to make her do it more. So I mean, how does one ever get out of that?
So that's a really interesting and somewhat difficult question you've just asked there, Richard, about sort of how does it stop, given what we know about dopamine and the injection and the hit a person gets to it. And part of the answer to that question comes, we can talk about how you respond. And that's really step 3. That's when we look at the different ways that you can choose to respond to what's happening and the behaviours and the choices that your wife is making, that Jill is making. So we'll put that aside for now, but because there's something else that I think some addiction relevant information that might be really useful that helps to explain a bit more about, even with dopamine, why don't people stop? And it's a thing called the cycle of change. Some people call it the cycle of addiction, and I've actually got a diagram that I'll share on the screen in a couple of seconds that helps us understand the stages of change and the things that happen in terms of the different motivations people have to make a change, and how they can sort of jump back and forth between them. So bear with me a second while I share my screen. And hopefully technology is friendly with us today. So can you see that? Can you see the picture there that says stages of change and a couple of different and 6 different kind of parts to the circle?
Yes, indeed. Yeah.
So often when people are gambling or drinking or engaging in that sort of a behaviour, we know that the dopamine plays its part to make them feel really good. And a lot of people kind of start off with, it's really good, there's no problem with it. The first section up there, they haven't even thought about it being a problem. It's just a thing they do that it enjoys. It's often called pre-contemplation. So the person is unaware that there is a problem, or they're ignoring the problem. So the consequences of the choices they make about their gambling or their substance use don't factor in. It's fun, it's cool. Others around them, like husbands and other family members, might see the problem, but they're almost blissfully unaware. Often then people move to the next step where the negative consequences, the bad effects, perhaps even the conversations that partners have with them about, oh, you're doing this again, where's all my money gone? That can sometimes then create I suppose some negative consequences that in this case Jill becomes aware of and says, oh, maybe there are some problems here. There's still really good stuff. I still get that dopamine, but I'm also getting the not so good stuff. I'm running out of money. My husband's getting angry at me. And they start to develop this thing called ambivalence. So I like it, but I don't like it, but I can't stop because it's so much fun, but I need to stop because I've got no money. And they're starting to think about making a change, and they kind of waver back and forth between the two. Sometimes they might just go, nah, it's all too hard, and they go back to being, I suppose, what we might call pre-contemplative or a happy user. But sometimes when the balance shifts and they go, actually, it really is terrible. It really is bad. They move into this, it's almost like this preparation stage where they start to get ready to make changes. They might, they realize the negative consequences, things are changing, and they start to think about, well, what might it look like? They might talk with friends, they might talk with their partners about, yeah, it's pretty terrible, maybe I shouldn't do it. And sometimes they can get stuck not knowing what to do next, and they might slip back. Or they might go, actually, yeah, maybe I need to reach out. Maybe I need to contact, a gambling organisation or a drug and alcohol service to get some help. And so when they've moved beyond that ambivalence, they can move into what we call the action stage of change, or number 4 on that diagram. They're doing it. They begin to make a change. They're actively, controlling how much they use their phone. They're putting it over there so they're not accessing their gambling games, or they're avoiding going to the pub, or getting someone else to do their shopping so they don't get the drive to purchase, to go to the liquor aisle in the supermarket. They may start attending groups. They might go into AA or GA, or even see their doctor and get referred to a service for help. So they begin to make change, and this can be quite a positive thing for family members to see and say, oh yeah, cool, that's really good, they're making a change. After they've done that for a while, they can get into what we call the maintenance stage, where they've made some changes, they're able to stick with them. And yet at any point in time, we see number 6 happen, which is the slipping back. The language that often gets used is they have a lapse, which is a step backwards. They return to the old behavior, even if it's only for a little bit. That's what we call a lapse. Or if they go back to it hard and fast, like they never stop, we call that a relapse. But this is actually a common part of the process, that the dopamine is the thing that people crave. If they're not getting enough of it from other areas, and they're missing it too much from their gambling or the drinking or the smoking or whatever, then they return to the behavior. Something stressful might happen in their life and they go, oh, I just need to feel good. I know the thing that makes me feel good. Where's my phone? Where's the game? Let me hear the little tingles and the thrill of winning. So even though this is a circle that goes 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, it's not often cyclical. It's not often linear, or it doesn't necessarily go that way. People can kind of jump that, they're doing it, and then all of a sudden they say, no, it's not a problem, I don't care anymore. And they might slip back to that number 1. And then they might go, actually, no, I know I've got to do something about this. Who do I need to call? Where do I need to get help? And they go to that kind of preparation stage. But it's really important for family members to understand this is the normal process. This is what's happening for Jill, that she goes back and forth. Have you noticed some of these behaviours, if we were to kind of think about this in Jill?
Absolutely, yeah. And for me, this makes a lot of sense, and it's actually very helpful, this idea of there being a structure to try and understand how she might change. But then I suppose the big question is how do I help her move from where she is at the moment round this cycle? Largely, I think she's still at 1, maybe a little bit of 2, but oscillating between 1 and 2. I don't know what she really thinks, but what she says is she doesn't think really there is a problem.
And I suppose one of the most important things to help you answer that question is to understand where she's at, because, and we can spend some time going through this now, or perhaps I can give you some more information to read up about how to approach someone in the different stages of change. So for someone who hasn't even thought about it or doesn't think they've got a problem, the only thing that we can do, we can't make them. And part of this is step 3 as well, thinking about how to respond. But understanding that if someone doesn't think they've got a problem, we can't tell them they've got a problem. We can help them see the consequences. We can talk to them about consequences. We can show them consequences. That's one way that can potentially help someone move from the first part to the second part, where they're starting to see. And even getting them asking questions about what do you like about it, what don't you like about it, can perhaps create some of that ambivalence that's in that starting to think about stage. If someone's getting ready to change and you say, all right, Jill's talking about getting some help, then you can offer information and advice. And, you know, some of the information that we can give you is about where to get help for her. And then in doing it, and she's in that stage, it's about offering, you know, asking her what she needs from you to help her, perhaps help her be distracted, help her, you know, you do the shopping so that she doesn't, you know, if drinking was a problem, so that she doesn't have to be faced with the temptation of the liquor aisle, or perhaps you agree to take the phone off her. And again, some of this doing stuff on your part really is the focus of our next session, to think about whether you put up with it, engage with it, or withdraw from it. And that'll make a bit more sense when we talk about it next week.
How does that sound for you? I mean, tell me your understanding of what I've just described to you there.
It makes it much clearer that I shouldn't actually be expecting a sudden, I don't know, a sudden cure, a sudden stopping. I mean, that's also a little depressing, to be honest, that you're saying probably I shouldn't expect that. And it's good to know, but it's just a pity to know that sounds like the nature of what these problems that Jill's got are like.
Yeah.
So it sounds like really one's got to be in for a longish haul.
And that can sound, as you said, quite kind of depressing and a bit of a pity. And I just noticed then, it's almost as though your body kind of went, huh, you know, I'm here, I'm wanting to try and create some hope and create some, you know, hope that things will be better. And having this information, even though it sort of sounds like a depressing piece of information, can give you a better sense of understanding and perhaps a more realistic approach to it. I mean, how does...
That's true. I mean, I was saying at the beginning that I didn't understand what was going on, and I felt very much out of control. So although what you're saying I don't think is very hopeful, except that, you know, change is possible and that people do change, so that's hopeful. But obviously not a quick fix. But I do feel that I understand a bit more, so I feel less out of control.
Less out of control, yeah. And
that's good.
Yeah. Well, that's I'm glad, and again, it's kind of one of the parts of the work that I do is to try and get people to have this realistic perspective without sort of dashing all their hopes. Because, you know, when we did that questionnaire last week and we talked about, you know, all the impacts on you, you know, the anxiety and the poor sleep and even the low mood, and you said that feeling of depression, you know, again, these are really common experiences. These are normal experiences for this abnormal situation. And I wonder, in terms of sort of giving some hope and sort of righting that balance that I've just unbalanced for you, would it be useful? I mean, is there any information about perhaps managing anxiety or stress or sleep that would be useful for you to have to help out?
Yeah, I mean, as I said to you last time, and I think I probably ticked the various boxes on that questionnaire. I mean, you know, Jill and I have been together for 35 years. It's a very long, time, and you know, I'm coming up to 70, and I hadn't expected to be where I am in this relationship and in my life. I was expecting to, you know, thinking about, you know, enjoying my retirement and that sort of stuff, not worrying about how much money is being spent on gambling and what the problems are going to be when Jill gets drunk, and what we're going to do in social occasions, and what we're not going to do is we don't have social occasions because I'm worried about her getting drunk. So I mean, I'm a long way from where I thought I might be at this stage in my life, and I do feel very, very, very low about it, and I do feel quite anxious about it, and my sleep is really not very good, and I'm waking up, in the night and very early in the morning. So yeah, I mean, if there's information that you can give me that's going to make that feel better, gosh, that would be very nice.
Absolutely, there is, and so about your mood and depression and anxiety and sleep, there's lots of different resources that I can give you some links for in terms of online work. How's your capacity to, or are you confident, sort of, if I were to give you a website that you could navigate your way through? Here in New Zealand, we've got this depression.org. Sorry.
I'm talking to you through a computer at the moment, so I managed to get that far. So cool. I'm sure that if you sent me something, I could either type it in, or some of these things you can just click on them, can't you? And
absolutely,
magic. It's magic. You just click on it, and suddenly you're there. So yeah, I'm sure I can do that.
Awesome, cool. It's important that I check, because I could absolutely just bombard you with websites, but sometimes it's useful to know which are the good websites, and I tend to stick to ones that and what I'll send you is ones that are connected to the health service, ones that are connected to even universities. They tend to have really relevant and believable information and links attached to them. So I can send you some stuff about depression and what that looks like. But I suppose I'd just like to talk.
That's what I feel.
But these websites kind of talk about.
I might be able to do. Might be able to make me feel a bit less depressed. That would be even better.
Well, they have ideas, they have suggestions, they have information about things that you could do that perhaps give you a break, or take your attention elsewhere, or help you become more physically active, which is a really important thing. Depression, there's less particular neurotransmitters working through our body, and doing some exercise actually has a massive impact. Exercise is the world's best antidepressant in terms of getting people moving. Sometimes you need the motivation to get the motivation to feel the motivation to do more. But maybe
that's very helpful, actually, because I think that over the last couple of years I've spent more and more time really thinking about Jill and her drinking and her gambling. And I've actually spent much less time doing the things that I used to do. I don't read as much. I used to do quite a lot of exercise. I don't do that really. I hardly do any exercise now. So yeah, I can see that something to help me move away from the place I've got to could be very helpful.
Yeah. So certainly information about what you can do differently in terms of your mood is really important. Some of what you've talked about there is still sort of getting into what we're going to do next week around how you respond to Jill's behaviours, and again we'll park some of that stuff in terms of your responses to her, but we'll bring it back to you, and and the worry and the stress and the fears and the anxiety, and perhaps it might be useful, and even sleep. I've got some really good information on a thing called sleep hygiene. Have you ever heard those words before?
No.
So it's all about, and I mean, in this day and age, you probably know all about hand hygiene, don't you? You wash your hands this way, you do it that way. It's all about routines and processes, and that's what sleep hygiene is as well. It's about the process or the routine or the preparation of how to do sleep properly. And so it can be really useful to know that, to organize a routine to get you ready for sleep. So
I've never even thought about doing sleep properly.
No, not a lot of people do, and people then find out that as it showed on the questionnaire we did last week, that your sleep is pretty terrible, and part of it is because you're not getting yourself ready for it. Perhaps the bedroom environment's not as conducive to sleep as it could be. But the other part to it, this ties in with anxiety and stress, is that sometimes we go to bed with a head full of stuff, and we churn it over and we think about it. And sometimes we need to know a little bit about, what can I do with that? How can I even interrupt my own thoughts? And there's a really fabulous website that I use quite a bit called getselfhelp.co.uk, and I'll send you that link. And they talk a lot about how to interrupt your own thinking, how to stop your thinking, and to be able to kind of check it and say, oh, hang on, is this what I want to be thinking about now? Is this a helpful thing for me to be thinking about now? And sometimes it's handy to know that, well, with a bit of practice, I can recognize what I'm doing here and put that thinking somewhere else. And I'll come back to it, not at 2 o'clock in the morning when I've just woken up, but, perhaps I'll do that at 11 o'clock tomorrow morning, So I'll go back to sleep now. I'll perhaps use some breathing techniques. I can do some meditation or even some yoga, some mindfulness. These are all techniques that a lot of people don't know about and don't know how to do, but are really valuable in terms of just interrupting that thinking to help you get to sleep, or perhaps cut off those worries right here, right now, when you're looking at your wife and thinking, what's she doing? Oh, and you're getting all worked up and built up. Or perhaps if you're just in one of those low moments thinking, this is not where I saw my life. This is not where I wanted to be able to kind of interrupt that. Do you know any breathing techniques? Would it be helpful if I shared one with you?
Breathe in, breathe out.
Breathe in, breathe out. Again, it's kind of like sleep. Hey, we do it, but sometimes we don't really do it deliberately or think about it. So there's lots and lots of different breathing techniques, but one that I find really useful, and I share with a lot of family members, is just I call it breathing in fives. So all you do is something as simple as you breathe in, and as you breathe in, you count to 5, then you hold that breath and count to 5, and then you breathe out and count to 5. So the counting's done all up in here, and you do that 5 times. And so that allows you to get back in control of your physiology, to actually, slow down your heart rate by kind of releases some of the tension in your muscles. And by the constant counting, it helps to just cut your thinking off. So at the end of it, you're in this space going, okay, Richard, what am I going to focus on? What am I going to tell myself? What am I going to do right now? How does that sound as a technique?
It's really interesting. I mean, I'd never even thought about that, but I can see from everything you're saying why it could be really helpful. So maybe it's like a triangle, so 5 minutes, count to 5 breathing in, hold it for 5, breathe out for 5, and do that 5 times.
Do that 5 times. Absolutely.
Counting the whole time.
Yeah.
Right, okay. I'll certainly give that a try. That sounds really. Yeah. I mean, a lot of things you're saying, both about sleep and about breathing, actually sound really hopeful. I don't want to sort of. That makes me feel actually a lot more hopeful than I felt for quite some time, that I might not be, in this sort of nadir the whole time. But I could actually get out of it, which would be rather nice.
Yeah. Well, there are things that you can do for yourself that are kind of independent of what's happening with Jill, that this is you getting control. And so, having this information is quite a powerful thing, isn't it? I'm wondering.
Could you, you said you're going to send me that website about sleep. Could you just, I know what I'm like, could you just remind me about the breathing as well when you
absolutely. I'll send you that as well. And I mean, there's there's lots of different versions of that. That's just the one that I kind of like because it's easy to remember. It's 5s. Most of us have 5 digits on our hand, so it's easy to count along. But yeah, absolutely, I can send that through to you as well. I'm just wondering, Richard, as I said at the start, it's one thing we can do today as well is just check whether or not anyone else in the family might need some information, whether you share some of the stuff that we've talked about already. But, if you think about maybe Jill's mum or even your own daughters, do you think there's any information that they might need to help them manage their own stress and strain?
Well, I'll certainly share what you've told me and what you're going to send me with them. I mean, I know Jill's mother is actually concerned. I mean, they don't talk about a lot of things in that family, but she's almost 90, and I know she's worried because she can see that things aren't quite right. Although obviously I've not shared all of the problems with her, and Jill certainly hasn't. But and Jill's brothers and sister are all in their different ways a bit concerned. So I think what I might do is talk to them about the help that I'm getting from you.
Nice. Yeah.
And ask if they're interested in me giving them updates about what I'm learning, and then that might mean that they could potentially do the same, but at least they could get some of the help that I feel that you're giving me at the moment.
Giving to you.
So that would be nice. And awesome. I mean, with our daughters as well. I mean, obviously they've left home, they've got families themselves, so they're slightly removed from it, but they can see that all's not well.
All's not well. Yeah.
And they can see that I'm worried and less fun and less active than I was. And that they're not so aware about Jill's gambling, but they are aware about her drinking.
Well, it's the more obvious of the behaviours, isn't it? Really.
It's always a stressful-ish time whenever we get together as a family, because alcohol's part of what you do when you get together with people, and they're always a bit ambivalent, really. Should they be offering Jill a drink or not, and all that stuff, and then what's going to happen if they do, and how quickly she drinks when she does, and
lots of questions. Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, I think there is a lot of need for information. Others than family, but I think the way I probably want to do it is just share some of the stuff you're sharing with me with them, and seeing where that takes us.
Yeah, that sounds really, really good. And obviously you quite, there are a whole lot of concerns, and some things that you said there about the family is something we can address a little bit later. So in our step 4, when we look at our networks of supports, that there is a part of that where we actually talk about how do we communicate with other family members to come up with almost like an agreed communication or an agreed approach to Jill. Her daughters, her mum. How do you all not necessarily agree to do everything the same, but at least agree, or at least know and have a shared understanding. It's even a step almost before that, which is that I feel ambivalent about how much you're talking about. I know what you said we're going to do in another step about being supported by other people. But no, it's I don't know how much to use them for support, because on the other hand, because they're part of the family as well. So do I talk to the girls about their mum? Do I talk to her mum about her daughter? Do I talk to her brothers and sister about, is this me washing our dirty laundry in public? Am I getting support from them, or am I making them more worried by talking to them? I mean, I don't know. So that talking about that, I know we're not going to do that this time, but talking about that at some time will be really helpful, because I don't know what the hell to do. And again, we talked about this last time, that you know, this is a common experience of family members, hey, to kind of sit there and go, what do I do? There's, as I was going to say, there's no manual on the right or wrong way to do this, because there actually is no right or wrong way. And we're really going to talk some more about that next week as well. But I think the key thing is, if we kind of bring it back to where we are today, and your information needs and sharing information with the rest of the family as well, is that handbook, that self-help handbook that I gave you last week, that we gave you a copy of, that's a really good starting point. You know, there are bits there that you can share. You can show that, as well as the websites with, you know, with your kids and potentially with your mother-in-law as well.
Yeah,
so
that's I mean, I couldn't, I mean, you sent it to me, obviously, as an electronic copy, as a PDF. I know enough about computers to be able to open them. And I couldn't sort of send that to Jill's mother, because I don't think she recognises much about which end of the computer you look at. But for the girls, our daughters, that could be. I think there's a lot. I mean, I thought there's a lot of good stuff in that handbook.
There is.
So,
yeah.
I that's very helpful to think that I can share that on.
Share that along, absolutely. And there are lots of websites, there are lots of resources. So, you know, that's a really good starting point to go looking for more information. You know, if we haven't been able to answer all the questions today, that's a starting point. And obviously, you know, next week, or if between this session and the next session, if you come up with any other questions, anything else you want to know more about, you know, just let me know, and we'll find a way to either. I mean, it's not just, I'm not the only source of information here. I want you to be able to walk out of here going, all right, I know where I can go if I need more information. Those websites that I'm going to send you are a really good starting point. So I'm wondering, you know, if we kind of wrap today's session up, you know, we've talked a bit about your information needs, and hopefully provided you, well, it does sound as though, you know, giving you some information about sleep and depression, and information about dopamine and that cycle of change. What's been most helpful for you, do you think, from today?
Well, absolutely the most helpful stuff has been you talking to me about and giving me some hints, and going to send me some more information about things like sleep and depression and breathing and so on. As I said to you before, I felt actually a little bit down when you were telling me about dopamine and the cycle of addiction and change and lapse and relapse, and because obviously there's a lot of me that would actually quite like some magic wand.
Yes,
to
absolutely.
just get us back to where we were earlier in our marriage, where these were not problems. So I felt, you know, I felt you didn't say it, but I felt you were saying, look, you've got to be prepared for the long haul here. And I was thinking, God, I'm going to be 70 soon. How long is a long haul? But then afterwards, when you started talking more about things that I could do for me, that actually felt quite hopeful, because it made me realize that actually I haven't done anything for me for a long time. I've got more and more focused on worrying about Jill, and less and less focused on keeping fit or getting back to being fit, or you know, sort of any of those other things. So that that was really helpful. Thank you.
Okay, that's that. I appreciate the thanks, but yeah, I mean that's the reality, isn't it? And we will touch some more on that in next week's session, when we look at again how you respond, and to kind of give you a little bit of a bit more of an intro to that. You know, there are three main ways that family members respond, and we're going to explore these in more detail next week. And you know, we can stand up to it and sort of engage with the problem, and really try and, you know, get her to get help and stop her gambling and take her phone off her and not buy her, and, you know, those sorts of kind of helping her to do something about it. That's one style of coping. The other is where we just put up with it. We just kind of sit back and tolerate it. And, oh, I don't want to rock the boat. It's all too hard. I don't want to make it worse. I'll just I'm in it for the long haul, and I just have to live with it. And the third one is kind of, you're touching on a little bit of it here, is where we kind of withdraw from the problem and begin to focus on ourselves and look after ourselves and almost begin to live a life about us as opposed to a life about the problem. So the purpose of it is to help you understand that there are different ways that you can respond. There's no right or wrong, but each has their advantages and disadvantages. And we're going to look at what you're currently doing, but also what the alternatives are. And a lot of family members find that, really a practical thing to do, because they want to know, what can I do? And this is where we start to talk about, well, what are you doing? And what else could you be doing? So that's next session. And obviously you can read ahead in that self-help handbook to find out a little bit more about it. Does that sound all right?
It reminds me of when I used to make time to watch television series, and they'd end on a cliffhanger. Next time.
Next time, yeah.
Yeah, so that's actually that makes me quite eager for us to get to next time.
Nice. Cool.
Yeah, I'd like to do so.
Cool. So in a second, we'll figure out the logistics of the time and the date and the place, and how we're going to make this work. But I just want, and you heard me do this at the end of last session, I just want to spend a moment just kind of checking around kind of risk and safety and your safety and Jill's safety. How are you feeling in that space?
Well, I suppose it's similar to what I said last time when we talked about it. Generally, I mean, I feel relatively safe. Jill can get violent when she's drinking a lot, but that's not a real huge problem. I don't think she'd ever get sort of violent, as in sort of knives and things like that. So I think it is equally as much a problem that I get really frustrated, and I think that I can be angry, and sometimes when she's drunk and I'm angry, we can bounce off each other. But I don't think there's any safety issue there. I just think it's part of what happens in lots of relationships. I don't think there's any chance of her doing anything stupid or killing herself or anything like that. And I don't think there's any chance of me doing that at the moment either. Particularly after a helpful conversation today. If I can sleep better.
Absolutely. I think, I hear what you're saying about, so you're not worried about your own sort of safety as such. But I think it's always still, as we touched on last week a little bit, always handy to know, just in case, what I would do. If the violence escalates, how to remove yourself, how to put yourself in a safe position, who you might call to come and just intervene, and whether that's the police if it really does escalate, and or even just, do you go to the neighbours? And that was the sort of the plan that I think we hinted at a bit about last time. But certainly, it's good to hear that you're not feeling worried about harming yourself or her harming yourself. But obviously we talked, there are numbers to call, and I gave them to you last time that, if that were to change, it's important to know, this is what I do in that situation. If I'm starting to feel that way, or if I'm concerned that she is, we always check. It's really, really important, because this can change over time. Moods can go up, moods can come down, drinking can get more aggressive. Yeah.
It feels very nice that you do check. So, I think things are fine, but it's nice to know that you do check.
Cool. So, yeah, no, it's an important thing. We want to be able to see you again next week, and we want to know that that you are okay, and that's important. So we'll work out.
If I come in next week with bandages around my head and my arm in a sling, you'll know I was wrong.
We know that we need to do a bit more in terms of keeping you safe. So in terms of next week, is this same time, this same day working for you? Yeah,
it works very well. Yeah.
And you've got my details, so if anything changes, if you can't make it, or if I can't, we need to, you know, we can connect and find a backup time.
Yeah, that's all great. That's great.
Cool. Awesome. Hey, listen,
you'll send me that stuff.
I will. I've written myself a list here of the stuff that we'll do, and I'll get onto that before I catch up with my next person. So, but for now, you know, look after yourself. Thank you for you know, being here and being on time, and I hope, and it sounds as though it has been helpful. So that's what that's good to hear.
Been very, very helpful, but a lot to think about as well. But thank you.
Cool. All righty. Well, we'll talk again next week then, Richard.
And now that you've seen the demonstration of step 2, some key points to remember that it is important that you need to be prepared for step 2, and you start that by how you finish step 1, making sure, checking with the family member their information needs, and utilising the family member questionnaire to help guide some of the discussion and information needs. It's important to check what the family member already knows, and then to check their understanding of the information that you give them. It's about dispelling myths, empowering them to find out information for themselves. An important thing as well is that you don't need to know everything. You can use the handbook, and you can also use websites and other sources of information. The key part is to make sure that if you can't give the information, the family member is capable and confident in knowing where to get it from. And again, it is always important to check domestic abuse safety issues as well, and ensure that there is a management plan. There is something that the family member knows what to do to keep themselves safe. So hopefully you found that a useful example of step 2.